All right, welcome back to the channel. Big Dog Brett, thanks so much for tuning in. Today, we've got a very special guest returning for a second time, Mr. Chip Towers of the AJC. Probably one of the most in-know guys when it comes to college football, especially University of Georgia. So welcome back to the channel, Chip. Chip, thanks so much for joining us again.
Always like being on with the big dog.
Thank you, sir. I just kind of want to jump into things real quick. A really exciting year for the Dogs. I feel like they've got a lot out in front of them, but there's certainly a lot of people out there who have brought this up and brought this up and brought this up. So I'm going to start it with this and get it out of the way. I bet you already know. What is your opinion of the quarterback situation in Georgia?
Oh, truthfully, Brett, I've moved on so far from that at this point because, after a while, it becomes an exercise in futility to even debate it. I mean, the bottom line is that the coaching staff made a determination a long time ago, and I can't refute them or I can't make arguments. There are some out there in the media who are still beating the drum about JT Daniels should be playing over Stetson Bennett. But my gosh, I mean, these guys, number one, you're in the national championship game. And number two, Kirby Smart, number one, Todd Monken, number two, all of them, have no reason to do anything other than to play the best player. I mean, we see what happens on Saturdays, but that's less than a fifth of what they see. I mean, that's probably a tenth, maybe less, because of all the practice. And the practice is broken down and it's evaluated. And, I do buy, and I enjoyed getting a chance to hear from Todd Monken at the Orange Bowl, who appeared to me like he was eager to talk about it and was fairly transparent from the standpoint of him just saying that, hey, I undervalued Stetson. And once we had him in there and kind of saw what we could do with him, I liked it. And then, JT Daniels, whether he's 100% healthy, 90% healthy, 80%, I don't know. But I thought the North Carolina game, for one, was just a perfect example of what Stetson can do that JT can't. Now, maybe JT can do some things that Stetson can't, but if you weigh the two skill sets, I mean, I think Stetson throws the ball pretty good. I mean, it's not great, but I mean, it's pretty dog. I mean, he's in the top 5 nationally in pass efficiency. So it's not like he's got a noodle arm. People try to say that. They also try to call him a midget. I mean, there's one small guy. He's not a midget. I mean, he's your basic 6 foot, 190 pound college football player who at every other position would, I mean, he'd look okay as a star in the defensive backfield, right? But right. He's an athlete and he's good, but the processing of the plays and going to the right receiver and escaping pressure and offering a run threat in the zone read scheme and all that kind of stuff, he's better. So I personally, I mean, I've been reporting, what's going on every week, but really it's been before the SEC championship game that I really weighed in as a debate, because they've made it's this will be 12 in a row, 12 starts in a row for Stetson, and 13 overall, or 10 and 14 or whatever it is. I mean, he's their guy.
Well, I was certainly one of the people that was an advocate for JT Daniels. I was pretty enamored with how he was able to have such big games. And I was one of the people that kind of had to be drugged to the light, so to speak, on Stetson's ability. And after seeing what I saw in the Michigan game, in my opinion, it was either you have to acknowledge that he is definitely a better quarterback than what most naysayers had given him credit for, or you ran the risk of looking a little bit foolish. I feel like the amount of performance difference that I saw between the SEC championship game and the Michigan game looked like two different quarterbacks. He really did. He looked much more comfortable. He looked much more confident. I thought that the Stetson Bennett that we saw in the Michigan game is a quarterback that should have no problem winning a national title. So for me at this point, the last thing I would want to see is JT Daniels go win the game simply because that would mean something has went wildly wrong. And number two, he hasn't had a whole lot of time to shake off any rust, and you just can't shake off rust in practice. You just can't. So, at this point, we just need to kind of get behind Stetson and just support this guy. And I was one of the biggest JT Daniels advocates we had. So if I can see the light, then I think other people could too. Let's talk real quick. There's a lot of people saying that they don't want to see the Georgia versus Alabama game rematch. They've already seen this game. I feel like the two teams that are going to play in just about a week now are much different than the two teams that we saw play in the SEC championship game. And I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on that.
Well, they're definitely different. They're also the same. I did a little bit of research on this. Some people would argue that I never do research, but I did a little bit. It was not comprehensive, being again fully transparent. But just checking to see rematches in the national championship game. There's been a bunch of them, and they kind of tilt toward the losing team in the first matchup. For whatever reason, and it just comes down to the old adage: it's hard to beat a good team twice.
Yeah,
that's true in the NFL, in the NBA. We're probably less so in the NBA, but definitely in football. And, ultimately, I don't know why that is, but, obviously Georgia did not play well in the first matchup, number one. I mean, they got up 10-0, but I'm still flabbergasted about the defensive performance we saw. Not really on the deep balls, because, I think we've all know at this point that that's a vulnerability for Georgia.
right.
Is man-to-man coverage on the edge with really fast guys. Darian Kendrick has great technique, but he's probably not a 4-3 guy.
Right.
And Keely Ringo is still raw. He's a redshirt freshman. And that's just a tough position to be on an island, period. The whole thing about the first matchup was 0 sacks, which blows my mind even more.
Right.
And it wasn't from lack of trying. Georgia, if you look, they were dialing up some stuff, and they actually did pressure Bryce Young. They never sacked him, but they did pressure. And so that's going to continue to be a problem with Georgia in this game, in this matchup. Now, the John Mechie thing is huge, I think, because
Absolutely.
What makes Alabama so difficult is because you got John Mechie on one side of the field and you got Jameson Williams on the other. And, the other guy who's filled in basically is Ja'Cory Brooks, and he's a freshman and he's good, but he's a freshman. He's not a senior like like those two guys, and he's not quite the threat. I think, either Keely Ringo or Darian Kendrick can neutralize a Ja'Cory Brooks more than they could a John Mechie. So that helps. And between the two teams, in terms of new injuries and that kind of stuff, I think Alabama got a little bit more beat up in the Cincinnati game. And then there's just the all factor. I think, as much as it's hard to believe, I don't think Georgia took Alabama for granted in the SEC championship game. But if you look throughout the history of sports, in all sports, look at Gonzaga in basketball last year. When you run the table undefeated, I don't know. There's something about losing a game that just gets your attention. You're listening a little bit harder. You're paying more attention. Humility is good. And as Kirby likes to tell us, it's always a week away. Well, it was a week away there. Now, do be clear about this, and I know you know this, Brett. Michigan ain't Alabama. They are completely different. And you could not be any more wider on the spectrum, for Michigan being kind of smash mouth, and their pass game is completely built on play action. That's why they had more plays of 50 or more yards than anybody else in the nation, is because of the effectiveness of play action. Georgia did exactly what they had to do. They shut down the run, making the play action moot, and game over. There was they had 1% pretty good long pass, I think. But other than that, they couldn't. Their longest plays were quarterback runs from scrimmage.
Yep.
So this is different. And you got it. Sometimes you got the GOAT, Saban, who's making adjustments. And so he's going to make adjustments to Georgia's adjustments, and he's going to make in-game adjustments. So you got that factor. And then you got Bryce Young. I mean, and Jamison Williams, but Bryce Young has made Jamison Williams what he is. A great player and a matchup nightmare. So, he's still the quarterback last time I checked, and Nick Saban is still the coach last time I checked. And so that's still going to be an issue.
I think a lot of Georgia fans and a lot of Georgia players are really looking at the inconsistency that we've seen with Alabama all year. And that's not to take anything away from Alabama. Alabama won the SEC championship. Alabama has won a college football playoff game at this point. But there's certainly reason to wonder which Alabama team we're going to get. Now, you may say Alabama in the postseason is a juggernaut, and that's great. But there have been quite a few times that, yes, Alabama has won that national championship game, but they've also lost that national championship game. And I feel like this is a football team that, if Georgia was galvanized by the SEC championship game and Alabama doesn't have its best game, I really feel like that may be a recipe for Georgia to win this game. Maybe close, maybe more than close, or further away, than close. But I feel like this is a real opportunity for Georgia. Certainly looking at whenever Georgia played in the SEC championship game, at least in my opinion, we didn't see as many linebacker blitzes as we saw against Michigan or we saw earlier in the season. It, to me, almost seemed like Georgia dropped the linebackers back and tried to protect against the pass. But when you give a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback like Bryce Young, and you give probably first-round draft pick wide receivers like Mechie and like Williams opportunity for 4 or 5 seconds, he's going to find somebody open. Yeah. So if Georgia can make that transition now to really increase the pressure, which we saw in the Cincinnati game, Cincinnati did a pretty good job in my opinion. I think Georgia has a good opportunity of disrupting Bryce Young. It seemed like Bryce Young, when he got under pressure, struggled. And I think Georgia has to do that rather than try to drop back and just protect against the pass. I think they have to be more aggressive.
Yeah, I think they probably will too. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they certainly didn't blitz as much as we've seen them, and sometimes it's a little bit of a misnomer because Georgia gets such good pressure rushing the 4 and 1 linebacker. So it's not like because on most teams you're just rushing 5 and that one guy's running free because the 4 up front takes so much attention. That wasn't the case against Alabama, and it was really in the second half before Georgia started dialing up some real exotic stuff. Generally, they try to stay away from that for a myriad of reasons. But you're right. Hey, it's one and done. I mean, so I think you'll see them. I think you'll see them break it all out in this one.
Now, the next topic I kind of want to broach a little bit is this was the first time that we had saw a non-Power 5 team make the college football playoff. And that non-Power 5 team lost in a huge way against Alabama. However, I feel like if that same Cincinnati team would have played Michigan, it would have been a much closer game. And I feel like people are saying, well, see, that's why you don't put non-Power 5s in the college football playoffs. I feel like they're taking away a little bit from Cincinnati. I think since you're a little closer to the whole inner workings of college football than most of us are, what's your opinion on that?
Well, there's my opinion, and then there's what's going to happen because, it's inevitable. Expansion is inevitable. They're still, posturing and politicking and going back and forth. But whether it's 8 or 12, there's going to be a playoff. And probably, I'm an older guy and I'm a traditionalist. So, college football needed a better way to determine a national champion. And I think the 4 team has been better than the BCS and better than most of what they've done. But I'm also for inclusion of all types. It's just like you talked about. Cincinnati, even going in and getting knocked out this year, the benefits that appearance has provided that program is going to last for a while. Luke Fickell's staying at Cincinnati when he could have gone anywhere. That, you look out, they're going to build off of that. And I think a lot of other programs deserve that opportunity. And then we see it in the NCAA tournament all the time for basketball, and we kind of roll our eyes because the basketball royalty seems to always be, in the end of it, right? Kentucky, Duke, the regular names are going to be there in the end. But how many times have we seen, whatever program it was make a run, and get going? And I think that's what this has the capability of doing. Now, I have always been an 8-game proponent because I feel like I don't feel like if you go to 12, now you're adding more games and you're going longer. And it's not that, listen, that dog's already hunt about them being amateurs and students, NIL, everything else has changed that. So it's not like I'm like, oh, they play too many. The kids
Right.
play too many games. That's not where I'm coming from. But 8 games to me, 18 playoff just makes sense to me. You got the 5 power conferences, and then you got 3 at-larges. You don't need a ton of at-larges. You need a few. Now the flip side of that argument, and I've heard Sankey talk. I think Sankey in the SEC, and certainly the most powerful conferences, the more spots they want, because that if it's at large, it's just like this year. Both Georgia and Alabama got in a 4-team, but I don't know. Would Texas A&M or LSU or somebody else have an argument in a year? Maybe a couple of them. Georgia, if you look at the model over just the Kirby Smart years, probably would have been in a couple more times. Certainly in the Mark Richt years, you'd have been in a couple more times. So, I like the idea of inclusion, but I don't think we necessarily need to see more SEC. I think you can still have the SEC is great. It just means more argument by your representative, whoever it ends up coming out on top, probably going on and winning it or being in the championship as well. But be clear, it's inevitable. It's happening. This stuff behind the scenes has been going on for months, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. I don't think you'll see all these contracts get fulfilled before it happens. Contracts are made to be broken, and they'll be broken, and then they'll have a new deal probably by 23, in my estimation.
All right, Chip, looking at the matchup here, Georgia, Alabama. I personally feel like the committee got it right. I feel like these are the 2 top teams in the country. I don't think anybody else would even be close. If these 2 teams played anybody else, I think they would probably get dismantled in the same fashion that we saw before. I think the spot between 1 and 2 is pretty dramatic. Is there any other teams you can think of that might have had a decent showing in the college football playoff?
Well, you never know. And, like we were talking about, expansion and everything, teams get hot. So let's think about it. Who was kind of hot at the end of the year? Maybe Ohio State, or they're always dangerous. I don't know. A couple of different teams might have made a little bit of noise, but yeah, you're right. I think this is an unusual year, kind of, in that. Alabama's kind of been in this position a long time. Georgia is, despite their issues with Alabama and everybody else. I think you can look at the recruiting rankings on a yearly basis, kind of the stockpile of talent, the commitment of resources, and all that kind of stuff. It makes sense that these 2 would be in this game. And, it's kind of like all year, we quibbled about, schedule and who you've played and transitive comparison. A lot of people like to do that. Well, Alabama played these guys and Georgia played these guys. And really all those metrics pointed favorably toward Georgia in the last matchup. But, there's no question in this year in particular, I think you could have had 5 or 6 other games. I think this is how it would have turned out. And I think that's good. I kind of think it's good that we're going way up to Indianapolis to cover the thing. It's not down here in the South. It's not in New Orleans or Atlanta. It's kind of truly going to neutral territory. And because I think it'll be a true kind of 50-50 up there, that's what you're looking for in these games anyway. You're kind of looking for neutral ground where all other circumstances are kind of taken out. And I think they'll do that. I'm not real excited about, I'm arriving on Friday, and I think it's a high of 18 and a low of 12 that day. And it's worse than that on Monday. It's got kind of a warm Saturday in between and snow in the forecast on Thursday. I mean, I tell you what's going to be funny is all these Georgia and Alabama fans driving up there. If there's going to be any precipitation, they might not make it, right? They'll get stuck on the side of the road in Louisville or something and never get in for the game. But I'm excited about it.
Well, the stadium that they're playing at, obviously Lucas Oil Stadium. I'm not sure, but isn't this a closed top stadium?
It is.
They can open it. They can retract it. They can retract the opening.
Yeah, it's a retractable roof, but again, based on Monday's forecast, I'm sure that the roof will be closed. Apparently, they can retract the roof and open like one end of it. A giant window or something drops down. You know how all these new stadiums are now. But no, it's going to be closed, and that's usually the case for most championship games because they want to take all elements out. All wild card thing. They don't want wind, they don't want rain, they don't want sun. They want everything to be. I think the way I've heard it referred to as controlled variables.
Yeah,
controllable variables. And that's the reason Alabama wanted the Cotton Bowl over the Orange Bowl, is because the Orange Bowl is going to be played outside. And my understanding is, had Georgia had its preference, it would have gone to Dallas as well for that same reason, controllable variables.
All right. Looking at the way the stadium is going to work out, it should be pretty fair conditions. I think a lot of Georgia fans and just SEC fans were kind of concerned about the conditions, but I think we're going to end up in a pretty good spot with that. I'm not going to ask you for a score prediction, but I will say I think Georgia has as good a shot as anybody winning this game of anybody that's played Alabama. I'm obviously going to be pulling for the Dogs. I'm sure you will too. Any kind of predictions you think anybody hasn't thrown out there yet, or something to just kind of keep an eye out for?
Well, I was reading something interesting today, and I think they were saying that Alabama's, if on the over under, and I don't know what the over under is for this game, but they've been under most of the time this year. I think a lot of people, they are explosive, but they're not last year's level of explosive. And they're not LSU's level of explosive in 2019. And so I think that gets overestimated sometimes. And plus, Georgia's defense has got to play better. So, last time Georgia gave up 34 points on offense to Alabama's offense. You had the one pick six. And Georgia didn't play as well offensively as it could. Now, people forget it was a pretty good game in the second quarter. It was just that little span, but he's spanning the second quarter, halftime, and third quarter where it got away from Georgia. So, if Georgia can avoid all that, I think it's going to be a really close game, possibly in the 20s.
Awesome. Well, Chip, we certainly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to spend with us and share what information you have. Really, really enjoy having you on the show. So for those of you that are watching, go check out Chip Towers at AJC. You can also follow them on Twitter. Constantly post up-to-date information, probably before you're going to see it or hear it anywhere else. So, Chip, once again, thank you so much for being on, sir.
Thank you, Brett. Glad to be with you.
Yes, sir.